Hi, I'm Shan Wu. Day 3 of the Signalgate issues. There's yet some more hearings that went on today as a follow-up, and put up the headline for you. So things changed a little bit today, but there's a lot that one can infer from what happened at the continued questioning of Tulsi Gabbard and the director of the CIA, John Ratcliffe. So one question that really arises, as we'll see as we look at the hearings, is do we need to consider another potential crime that could be charged? We'll hold aside the practicalities of how a charge would actually work with this DOJ, but that crime would be lying to Congress as a possible charge to have to consider, or at least a possible violation to be considered. Now, let me say, generally speaking, holding aside the practicalities of would this DOJ ever charge someone like Tulsi Gabbard, what's important about that is the political ramifications as the potential violation grows in significance and grows in weight in terms of its evidence, because that starts to give the political body, Democrats and even some Republicans may peel off to sort of call into question the competency of what happened here, gives them more traction, gives them more ammunition to start probing, to ask some questions. So don't think of the criminal violations only as kind of pie in the sky, as something going to get charged, go to jail, but think of it as a tool to open up the vulnerabilities for folks like Tulsi Gabbard and for the Trump administration. But let's talk a little bit about the practicalities, the possible charge lying to Congress. So there could be some limitations, statute of limitations issues here if this DOJ would not charge, which they probably wouldn't do. But the period could roll past the Trump term, meaning you could still bring it after his term ends, which is why you may see that some of the officials are beginning to really cover themselves some, because even though the Democrats, as well as other administrations, have shown very little appetite for going after a previous administration for possible crimes, but that tradition, for lack of a better word, might be something the Democrats, if they're so lucky to be able to have a new president, a new AG, they might want to keep that in mind as they're looking towards 4 years from now, and also keeping in mind what did not happen under Attorney General Garland. Now, Tulsi Gabbard today changed things a little bit in terms of her testimony. Today, the Director of National Intelligence did say that it was a, quote, mistake that a journalist was added to a Signal group chat discussing an imminent military attack on the Houthi rebels. What she actually said was, quote, it was a mistake that a reporter was inadvertently added to a Signal chat with high-level national security principals having a policy discussion about imminent strikes. So first of all, just can't help but point out, like, if it was not a mistake, then what? You deliberately included a reporter on a non-secure channel? That doesn't make any sense at all. So there's a little bit of gobbledygook coming from her. But when you look at her word choice, it's being very careful here. First of all, of course, inadvertent, that's important. And she's talking about the Signal chat had high-level national security principles. Choice of word, principles, because she doesn't want to implicate national security information. She just wants to talk about principles, like it's a theoretical discussion. And she also refers to it as a policy discussion about imminent strikes against the Houthis. It's not a policy discussion, right? Policy discussion is, should we do this? Should we not? What are the pros and cons of taking military action? This was all operational. It was about what kinds of planes were going to be used, what the targets were. So this was not a policy discussion, but she's trying to spin it that way. Why? Well, yesterday at the first hearings, where she first, as you may recall, claimed she couldn't even talk about it, was she part of the Signal chat, and like a few minutes later, sitting right next to her, the director of the CIA was happy to say he was part of the Signal chat. But at that hearing, she was warned by Senator John Ossoff of Georgia that he found it very questionable as to her credibility. He basically was saying to all the panel, not just her, put up the quote here for you, this is utterly unprofessional. There's been no apology, there's been no recognition of the gravity of this error, and by the way, we will get the full transcript of this chain and your testimony will be measured carefully against its content. That's basically a threat to say, you better be testifying truthfully here, and I don't think you have, because we're going to take a look at whether the actual signal chain measures up to the way that you're describing this. Now, the way that they're describing it also includes things like it was not classified information that she wants to continue to lean into, and Ratcliffe wants to do that as well. So when you listen to that, you really have to ask yourself, what's going on there behind the scenes, or why are they preparing them this way or letting them go out to make these representations? So let's listen to another snippet here. Listen to this little exchange.
Yes, Ranking Member. My answer yesterday was based on my recollection, or the lack thereof, on the details that were posted there. I was not, and what was shared today reflects the fact that I was not directly involved with that part of the signal chat, and replied at the end reflecting the effects, the very brief effects that the National Security Advisor had shared.
So it's your testimony that less than 2 weeks ago, you were on a signal chat that had all of this information about F-18s and MQ-9 Reapers and targets on strike, and you in that 2-week period simply forgot that that was there. That's your testimony?
My testimony is I did not recall the exact details of what was included there.
That's Asif talking to her. And in other words, yes, that is what she's saying. Another snippet?
That was not your testimony. Your testimony was that you were not aware of anything related to weapons packages, targets, and timing.
As the testimony yesterday continued on, there were further questions related to that, where I acknowledged that there was conversation about weapons, and I don't remember the exact wording that I used, but I did not recall the specific details that were included.
This is the don't recall, right? So this is the standard idea that no one's going to be able to accuse me or charge me with perjury if I'm simply saying, I can't remember, I don't recall. Now, there's a problem for her here, which is, like, you're thinking to yourself, why wouldn't she be given the transcript of what she had testified to? Obviously, she's going to be asked about it. Well, maybe that's incompetence, but more likely, no one wanted to give her that transcript to review it, so she has plausible deniability. Later, she can say, I hadn't reviewed the transcript yet. That's why I couldn't remember. That's why I made a mistake. Now, how does this happen this way? Well, why is this a viable defense for them? This happens primarily because in the Trump regime, they follow Trump's lead in just leaning into lies. Deny it, doesn't matter how much evidence there is, just lie about it. But he has John Roberts granted immunity. They don't. They might get it. There might be some sort of agency theory for giving it to them. But the problem is they act like they're him, like they have this kind of full immunity. So they're not very careful. And they're sort of assuming it's all going to blow over. It's probably not going to blow over very quickly. And she's just trying to keep it as muddy as possible because they're beginning to see, even in this 24-hour turnaround period, that it's not blowing over. In fact, there have been some polls indicating that people polled think this is a much bigger deal than, for example, the Hillary Clinton email issue, or even Biden's mental cognition issue. Now, Hegseth has not yet testified about this, although he's making lots of public statements. On Twitter, he is slamming the journalist from The Atlantic. He, however, you can tell from his public statements, he's going to lean heavily into some semantics. He keeps on saying this is nonsense, there are no war plans that were disseminated. He really wants to focus on the idea of what is a war plan, all right? And versus national defense information, national security information, operational plans for who to attack, how to attack them. He's going to be stuck with those facts because that's simply what's there. And there is beginning to be a little bit of bipartisan interest in at least giving some window dressing to look into these issues. So that stuff's going to come out. So he's trying to draw his line early to say, when I speak publicly and say there are no war plans, I'm speaking in a very specific way. There are like war plans, for example, what they're going to brief Elon Musk about on a war with China. This was not them. What this was, unfortunately for him, is just as bad, which was it was operational details, not policies, the way that Tulsi Gabbard was talking about. But here you begin to see two things. You begin to see the way that their defense instincts are lining up to guard against being accused of lying to Congress. And again, not because they'll instantly get prosecuted for lying to Congress, but because if the evidence is strong that they're lying to Congress, that's going to create a lot of political traction and vulnerability for the administration. Not to mention, maybe someone gets put up on the chopping block and gets canned. That's where you're seeing the don't recall, not knowing yesterday's transcript, Hegseth continuing to lean into there were no war plans. What are you talking about? They're trying to set up these little buckets that they can muddy the water with that somewhat comport with facts that are going to come out because they know it's going to come out. In the meantime, Trump leads the attack by saying that the reporter is a bad person. The publication itself is a terrible publication. So what's up with that next, right? Maybe there'll be an executive order attacking the Atlantic. We'll see. So we'll keep an eye on this. This is not something that's going to die very easily. In any other time in the past, this would certainly be a Watergate-sized scandal that could easily take down a lot of people in the administration, really hurt the presidency. We'll see how in this new era of Trump scheming, Trump spinning, the authoritarian type of mindset that is going on here in the regime, how it holds up to this. And we'll see if this gives Congress a chance to stand up and exercise its oversight authority. All right, we'll keep an eye on it. Talk to you soon.
In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories, the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.